Hello, I'm Michael Sarney and you're watching Leaders Live. The 2015 general election is just around the corner, and regardless of what you think about voting, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. This is your chance to find out if any of the UK's National Party leaders represent you and the issues you care about. Last week we had UKIP's Nigel Farage. This week we're joined by Ed Miliband, leader of the Labour Party. Welcome, Ed. How are you?
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight, Ed's going to be talking about jobs, health and democracy. Our fourth topic, chosen by you, our online audience, is immigration. Our studio audience is made up of some influential people and faces you might recognise. There's 15 of them, but collectively they have an online reach of millions. Throughout the show, they'll be selecting questions and comments from their Twitter feeds to put to Ed, but you can also get in touch direct. Tweet us at @BiteTheBallot using the hashtag LeadersLive or leave your comments on YouTube. Right, Ed, in 1 minute, can you tell us how your policy on jobs will directly affect the people in front of us?
Well, first of all, can I say it is great to be here, and I want to thank Bite the Ballot for making this possible, because it's a huge opportunity for me. I want to go back historically to 70 years ago when the government first set the objective of full employment, i.e. everybody more or less having a job. I think we've got to go beyond that. Jobs matter. 700,000 young people are looking for work in this country today, and we've got to guarantee jobs for young people, and that's what Labour would do. But I think the quality of jobs matters a lot as well. And too often, the jobs that young people are finding they're doing are insecure, low paid, and frankly, that isn't good enough. And I think we've got to change it. And this is part of a bigger vision that we've got for the country. I think this country too often works for a few people at the top of our society. I think it's got to work for everyday people again. That's why I'm in politics. That's what I want to change about Britain, and jobs is one part of it.
OK, well, thank you. Yeah, our first topic is jobs and the economy. Thanks for that, Ed. Let's just have a little catch-up from Marwan to give us some food for thought.
Jobs and the economy is one of the biggest issues talked about in British politics. It's not just about getting someone off the dough, it's about getting people into long-term careers. So putting someone on some random work placement that has no relevance to what they want to do is just as disempowering as being unemployed. And it's just a way of ticking boxes. So what we're going to do to make sure people are getting into the right kind of jobs.
OK, thanks for that, Marwan. Jamal, we've got a question from you first.
So it's obvious that we are in a big sort of crisis with youth unemployment. I know you were talking about it earlier, but what would you do to actually make a change?
Well, something very specific we can do, Jamal. We've said that we would tax the bonuses of the bankers, and we'd use those resources that we raise to guarantee every young person who's been unemployed for more than 12 months a job. And it would be a job at least at the minimum wage. It would be initially for 6 months. But we've had experience of this in the past, that when you make that happen, young people then get taken on and actually, get permanent jobs as a result of it. I think we should be guaranteeing jobs for young people. I don't think we should be letting young people be out of work year after year. So I think this is something we can do. We can mobilise business to do it, and that's what a Labour government would do.
And what about creating opportunities for people that have got businesses that want to employ? So, for example, everyone in here can have their own business. What can you do to support us as entrepreneurs as well to employ people that are in our demographic?
I think there's lots of things you can do. One of the things we'll do as part of this jobs plan, this compulsory jobs guarantee, is say to businesses, we'll pay the wages for 25 hours a week. The film pointed up this, we'll also be saying to businesses, you've got a responsibility to provide the training. So it can't just be that, if you like, we're saying to businesses, we'll pay the wages, you don't have a role to play. You've got a role to play too, which is to provide the training. And that's going to help businesses, I think, take young people on and be part of this big national mission, because we need a big national mission, Jamal, to get young people working.
And when you're saying about 25 hours, where are you going to get the money from to...
That's from the banker's bonus tax. So that's a very specific transfer of the resources that we're raising. And I think we all know the bank bonuses are carrying on. That hasn't changed, even with the financial crisis. Use the proceeds from that to get young people back to work.
And it's actually possible 100%.
It is 100% possible. We did something in the last Labour government, and I don't defend everything the last Labour government did, called the Future Jobs Fund. And I was at an event recently in Croydon, and there was somebody who said to me, I was part of that Future Jobs Fund, a business. It really worked. Will you bring it back? And I said, well, it's not exactly the same thing. We're going to learn a bit from that programme, but we're bringing back something similar to get young people working.
OK, well, guys, if you agree or disagree with the points Ed's making, tweet us at Bite the Ballot using the hashtag YesEd if you agree, or hashtag NoEd if you don't, and we'll bring you the results throughout the show. Guys, anyone else got anything to bring in? Yes, Jazza?
I've got a tweet from a guy called Tom, and he says, why has every Labour government ever left office with higher unemployment than when it started?
Well, look, I don't think that's correct. And actually, if you look at what the record of the last government was, what we actually did was we produced lots of jobs, but then there was a financial crisis. Now, you know, the Conservatives are going to say, well, it's only Britain that was affected by that financial crisis. You know, actually, the financial crisis affected governments all around the world. I think the question people want to know is what's actually going to happen in the future? You know, what are we actually going to do for the future?
Well, your comments are coming in online. Remember to continue to do so using the hashtag LeadersLive. Let's take a look at one now. It's DF and V. You've pledged that every young unemployed person will get a paid job. How will you guarantee this, and who will pay for it?
Well, that's the point, Mike, about the banks. The banks are going to play that really important role because I think, you know, people saw the financial crisis happen, and people are saying, you know, are they going to pay their contribution? I think one thing people are thinking at the moment is it seems like ordinary people are just paying the price of the financial crisis. I think banks have to make their contribution, and that's what we're going to do. And as I say, it's very specific, it's costed, and it will happen.
Will you get the sign-up from them, though? Can you guarantee that they'll do it?
From the banks?
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much getting the sign-up, because we're going to impose this tax on the bonuses and actually get the resources in. And we're going to get the resources in, and we're going to then use those resources. And I think that's fair. You know, I think people will think that's a fair way of getting young people working again.
Yeah.
I think the banking issue is obviously a very obvious way to tax people, and I think that's what a lot of parties believe, that the banks are making too much money and they're not sharing it around. I would say some other lucrative ways you can make money in Britain is being a politician. What are you going to do about politicians' wages? Because they're obviously very high as well. I think a witch hunt around banking is an interesting one, but it's not the only way we can
tax the politicians, not the bankers, you're saying. Well, I mean, is this about the potential MPs' pay rise that's being talked about? Is that what you're getting at?
Partly that, and I think just as a traditional kind of society, we think that politicians deserve to be paid a very, very high wage. And I think it's a really interesting kind of take to say that it's the banks.
Well, look, the thing I'd say just on this politicians' pay rise is I'm not going to be part of a government that gives a big pay rise to MPs when we're still having tough times for nurses, teachers, lots of public and private sector workers. I don't think that's on. The independent body that recommended this says, oh, well, they're making changes to the pension as well, which, if you like, take money away from the MPs. But I just think I can't imagine allowing it to happen, and we're going to have to find a way of stopping it, to allow MPs to get a big 9% pay rise or something while other people are suffering. Why do I say that? My principle is you've got to be a country where sacrifices are shared and rewards are shared. I think we're too unequal as a country, and we've got to change that. And MPs have to be part of that as well.
So you're saying you don't want to rise it, but would you lower it?
I'm not in favour of cutting MPs' pay. Look, I think being an MP is an important job, and you want people to be going for those jobs that are, you know, doing it. I mean, obviously, people aren't doing it for the money, but you want people to realise that it's a decently rewarded job. I just think when it comes to future increases and changes, I think it's got to be fair in the way it's done. By the way, the other thing I'd say, we need much greater diversity in our members of Parliament. That is a big challenge. It's a big challenge for my party and for every party. You know, take the ratio between women and men in terms of MPs. About a third of our Labour MPs are women. I don't think that's enough. I think it should be 50%.
Ed, we saw, I mean, you might have seen the pictures on the social media. I know they've floated about by a few people that the debate on MPs' salaries, the chamber was packed. The debate on the public sector was only a few people. How will you ensure that important debates like that are attended when it's to the benefit of the people?
You know, the thing I'd say about Parliament, and it's sort of not fashionable to defend MPs, and I'm saying this about MPs of all parties, is that what you see on Parliament is Prime Minister's questions mainly. Prime Minister's questions is ridiculous. And most people who are part of it think it's lots of people shouting at each other. Now, David Cameron's talked about changing it, so have I. It's really hard to change it. But it is an opportunity to question the Prime Minister, but it's not the only thing MPs are doing. MPs are doing lots of work for their constituents, and that doesn't get seen. So, in a way, I'm not here to sort of defend all MPs, but I do think that lots of MPs go into this for the right reasons, and they get, the people get a hard time for it. But I think lots of them are trying to do the right thing for their constituents, even those I disagree with.
OK, right, we'll try and get a few then. Hannah, then Max?
As much as I want to talk about this sort of stuff, but we'll talk about democracy in a bit, so I'm going to bring it back to jobs. What do you what's your party's policies on unpaid internships and zero-hour contracts?
OK, so let me take both of those, Hannah, because they're both really important questions. On zero-hours contracts, we're going to legislate for a new principle, which says if you do regular hours, month after month, you should have a regular contract, not a zero-hours contract. It's one thing if these are exceptional for short periods. What we can't have is people permanently on zero-hours contracts. I talked about Sports Direct the other day. The vast majority of their workforce are on zero-hours contracts, and it's like it's their employment practice. I don't think that's good enough. And so we'll say, if you're doing regular hours month after month, you will have a legal entitlement to a regular contract. Now, unpaid internships is harder, but I think it's a real issue. Here's why I think it's an issue. And somebody was saying this to me the other day in Corby. She was saying to me, look, my daughter's graduated from university. The only opportunities that seem available to her are to be an unpaid intern, but she can't afford to do that. She's got to go and live in London, pay rent of £1,000 a month. How's that going to work? I don't, in my office, have unpaid interns. I think we've got to do two things. We've got to work with businesses to say you can't have unpaid interns month after month. Short work experience is one thing, like very short, but kind of, if you like, permanent unpaid internships or long unpaid internships is more problematic. And secondly, we've got to talk to young people in business, and we're going to be having a youth manifesto where we want to talk about these kind of issues with young people and business to say, look, there's good things about internships, which is the opportunity, but there's real problems with this. Should we go further? Should we say you've got to have some time limits on the length of unpaid internships or work experience? Now, that would be a big step, but I think we've got to look at it, but I think it is an injustice and an unfairness at the moment.
How would you regulate it?
Well, that's what we've got to have the debate about. Because there's different ways of doing it. You could do it through the law, you could do it through other ways. But I think we've got to have this debate as a country, because I think it's becoming more and more in lots of industries, the only way you get your foot on the ladder is by being an unpaid intern, and that is unfair. It's unfair because if you can't afford to do it, you're not going to get your foot on the ladder. And I think we've got to really look at it seriously as a society.
So how do we have that debate as a society? Do we expect sort of these guys to go to their MP surgery, see their candidates? Will it be done online? Will there be a great way of these people to
give me a chance to play labour.org.uk. Look, be part of our consultation on a young people's manifesto. That's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about these kind of issues for young people. I just say one other thing because it relates to this point. I don't have all the answers. Now, politicians don't normally say that. I don't have all the answers. And by the way, I'm not even saying vote for me and in May, on my own, I'm going to change the country. The only way you change the country is by people doing it together. And the voice of young people is incredibly important. That's why what Bite the Ballot is doing is so important.
I think it's about I also think it's about transparency. For example, when I didn't get my job. I worked in Topman for 2 weeks as work experience, but if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have then stayed there for 4 years. But it was very difficult for me at first to go in there because they just saw me and it was like, go put it online, and actually how I got my job is my mum walked me in and then I got the job. It's about like the transparency.
Everybody needs your mum to help them, Jamal.
Between the consumer, between the people that actually work in the shops and the people that are working there.
So, Jamal, are you saying that you're saying that was a short work experience thing? Is that right?
I think 2 weeks maximum is like, but not more than 2 weeks, because you were talking about having a limit. Like, how can you make sure that that's sort of acted upon?
Well, that's the debate we've got to have. I mean, look, normally politicians come along and say, I've got all the answers. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but I am saying, I think the question that is it Hannah? Yeah. The question Hannah asked is really important, and lots of young people are saying this to me. They're saying, we feel this is a real injustice. about who gets internships and who's able to take advantage of them. And it's become a new route to people getting on in life, and we've got to have this debate as a country. And there's upsides and downsides, as with everything. You don't want to restrict opportunity, but you don't want opportunity to be incredibly unfair. So let's have the debate with the young people of the country. Let's have the debate with major businesses. There's different ways in which we can do something about this, but it is a debate we need to have.
Max?
Hi, Ed. First of all, I think you're probably not paid enough as MPs. I would probably pay a bit more. I might be at a minority there.
Some of my colleagues will be pleased to hear that. Thanks.
Right, it sounds great that you're going to guarantee a job for everybody who's
unemployed more than a year. Yeah.
Okay, unemployed. That sounds great, but how? How is that workable? Where do you do it? Because some areas there's huge unemployment, somewhere it's not enough. What about people who don't want the job that you're guaranteeing them? Do you force them to go and do it? In principle, it sounds like a great soundbite, but just doesn't sound particularly workable.
Well, it's much more than a soundbite, Max, because look, here's the thing. I meet lots and lots of businesses that say to me, see, I think so many great businesses in our country have a social conscience and they want to make a difference, but they say, well, look, there's all kinds of barriers to taking young people on. If we make it easier for them by paying the wages, but say they've got to play their side of the bargain by providing the training, I think we can have a win-win here and mobilise businesses. And I think there are lots of businesses that want to be part of it. But by the way, does it require a big national mission led by the Prime Minister? Absolutely. And I want to lead that national mission. I don't think any young person should find themselves out of work and unable to kind of have the opportunities. On your point about will young people have to take jobs, yes. I mean, it's got to be a job that's kind of right for the young person. But I don't believe in people just being able to say, I'm not going to take any job, I'm just going to be on benefits. I don't think, by the way, most young people want to do that. I think the vast majority of young people want to work, they want opportunity, and I think we need to give it to them.
Guys, we're going to have to move on because obviously we've got a few topics to get through. Thanks, Ed. You've been voting online on whether or not you agree with Ed's policies, and here is a snapshot of the results. Ed, 76% of people have gone for yes, Ed, they agree with the stuff you've said today. Well done. 24% have said no. On to the next topic.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. OK, the next topic is health. Here's Lena with a quick overview.
Our NHS, our Great British National Health Service, was formed as a political and cultural reaction to the depression of the 30s and the devastation of the Second World War. People in other countries have to pay to get well. What the hell? The fact that people my age in the UK have grown up with the NHS, and in some cases literally born into it, often mean that it's an assumed and almost invisible pillar of society for us. But can you imagine a Britain without it?
OK, well, powerful. Thank you, Lena. All right, Ed, tell us how our lives would look differently if you was Prime Minister and we had your policies on health.
I think I'm voting for Lena, actually, after that. I agree. I think the National Health Service is our proudest institution. I think it says so much about us as a country. Free at the point of need, healthcare, not dependent on the size of your wallet, not like America. Those values, we've got to protect and uphold those values. I want to stop the privatisation of our National Health Service. I believe the NHS is best when it's public. But I also think we've got to invest in our resources, invest in the National Health Service. And we've set out very specific proposals to raise taxes, and some of it's not popular, like a mansion tax on homes above £2 million. You'll see Myling Class, for example, doesn't like that so much.
The garages you're referring to.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And she gave me a hard time about that, but I think it's the right thing to do. There's one other thing I'd say about this. I think the way we think about the health service is still too narrow. It should be about physical health, but it should be about mental health as well. I think one of the biggest issues that many young people talk to me about is the quality of mental health services. And I had just very briefly, I had a letter from after I talked about this a couple of years back, I had a letter from a teenager, actually from my wife's old school, telling me about her experience. She ended up in hospital as a result of not getting that early help with mental health. And that is a really big issue for the country. So, we've got to invest in the health service. We've set out plans to do it, but it's got to be physical health and mental health.
OK, guys, do you agree with what you're hearing? Tweet hashtag at you bite the ballot, hashtag yes, Ed, if you do agree, and hashtag no, Ed, if you don't. We'll bring the results in a few minutes. Lucy, you got the first question?
Yeah, hi. So it's often said that politicians make a lot of policies without having real-life experience and also whilst ignoring research. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask you how you feel, like what are your experiences with drugs and how that informs you when making policies about it?
So I haven't taken drugs. That's my experience. Well, I'm not teetotal. I'm not teetotal. Just on that issue of drugs, let me just give you my honest take on this. I'm not in favour of decriminalisation, for example, of cannabis, because from my reading of it, and I have read about it, I think there are, and I think the debate has changed a bit on this in the last 10 years, I think there are mental health effects of cannabis, which maybe people didn't realise a decade ago. However, I'm sort of got enough humility to say we should always be looking at the ways in which we discourage young people from taking drugs, we have better drug treatment and all of those issues. So I haven't taken drugs, but I've got a pretty clear view about at least on the legalisation, decriminalisation question.
But there are mixed arguments on this, aren't there? I mean, obviously, some people think the war on drugs is lost. The underground scene is affecting young people, especially on sort of urban council estates. They're the ones delivering the drugs. When they get caught, they're the ones facing the punishment. But if it was regulated, for example, could it not be controlled so that the sort of TCP levels were lower? So it might not have as drastic side effects. The government would then earn tax out of it, and it was controlled. Is that not an interesting debate? We spoke about how these guys bring the debate to you around jobs. What about listening to the people that might do drugs, continue to do drugs, and obviously have got a different argument to the one you've just said there?
Look, I understand the argument. I do understand the argument, but I've got to say I don't agree with it. I think when society makes something legal or decriminalises it, it's definitely sending a message. It's definitely sending a message to say, you know, we should say cannabis, for example, is decriminalised. I really worry about the message that sends. I don't say that, you know, the sort of battle against people taking drugs or harmful drugs has been won. It hasn't been won. But and it's hard. But the question you've got to ask, even when things are hard, is it going to make it better to change things? And look, in my reading of it, it won't make it better.
OK, we've got a quick online question. Let's see who's coming in now. OK, Freya. What will you do about mental health education and awareness if you become Prime Minister? So touching on what you said earlier, how will this reach our schools, for example?
Well, Freya's question is really important. I'd say a couple of things. First of all, I think the job of mental health awareness isn't just a job for the NHS. I think it is a job for our schools. I think, by the way, that, and we've got a report coming out about this in a couple of weeks, I think that, and this isn't meant to sound at all sort of namby-pamby, I think that young people in schools should be taught about resilience. Life is great to be a young person today, but it is incredibly hard. And I think being able to cope not just with passing exams, but being able to be resilient against the things that come to you, knowing when you might have a mental health issue, I think that is really important. So it's about the schools, it's about workplaces, it's about workplaces being aware, and there are some great businesses doing a great job on that, but more of them need to be informed. And it's also about something else, which is about the NHS. Politicians sometimes pass laws and then aren't very good at implementing them. We passed a law saying that there should be parity between mental health and physical health in terms of access to treatment. We've got a long way to go in getting that. We've got to make mental health more of a priority.
OK, Jazza, and then Tom.
There was a gentleman on the live stream before we went live who asked a lot of questions, and I don't think he likes you very much.
That happens to me.
J-Cars96, and he said, on health, why should we trust the Labour Party, who privatised the NHS through PFI deals? He alleges that cost the UK taxpayer £300 billion.
Quick answer on that, Ed?
Well, let me answer directly, Jezza. We did bring in private finance to build hospitals. Now, that was a decision we took. Personally, I think some of the deals weren't the best deals, but overall, I think it was the right thing to do.
Would you reverse any of those?
Well, let me give you a direct answer to this question. My two sons were born in a PFI hospital, University College Hospital. It was, frankly, a falling down old hospital that I wouldn't have wanted my wife or my newborn children in before. Because of the influence of being able to do some of these things through the private finance initiative, we're able to build and modernise a lot more hospitals. So, of course, you don't get everything right in terms of some of the agreements, but I think overall, did it help to modernise our hospitals? Yes. The thing I was talking about most of all was this question of privatising and fragmenting the people working in the health service. See, I think the private sector can add on a bit to get down waiting lists, for example, which is what we did in government. But what this government has done is said markets, competition, that's the way the health service should be run. That's not my view. I think cooperation, care, and actually the public sector as a preferred provider in the NHS is the right way to go.
But the government seems to be really keen to keep it free at the point of care still, though. But so as long as we are still getting free care, like when we need it, isn't
in theory,
the point that it's the best as it, that
Short
it can
answer,
be?
please.
Well,
This one loves to babble.
In theory, yes. But if you find waiting lists going up, waiting times going up, more and more people are being told, well, you know, the way you can get this done quickly is by going private. I don't think you should have to go private to get proper care, timely care.
Tom?
Isn't this so-called NHS privatisation really just kind of local and patient choice? Because private provision is only one of the options that local commissioners can pick. And in the UK, private provision only makes up 9% of the health market, whereas in France it's 40%, in Germany it's similar. Is it too high, or surely it's too low, judged by international standards?
Well, Tom, the thing that the reason I disagree with that is what the government did was that they introduced this bill, the Health and Social Care Act, and they said in the bill that they wanted to bring the same concept to the health service that they brought to the privatised utilities in the 1980s, like the energy companies.
Well, didn't they get much better? Like phones you had to wait weeks for, and then suddenly you can buy them immediately. Isn't that a good thing?
We can argue about whether the energy companies are doing a great job or not, or the phone companies. But let me just say this: health is totally different. Look, let me just give you an example. NHS hospitals are hiring competition lawyers, costing tens of millions of pounds, because they're being told you can't cooperate with each other because that's like unfair collaboration. That isn't the concept of the NHS. I don't think NHS hospitals should be hiring competition lawyers. So,
do you regret that Labour doubled the amount of privatisation that happened during your last 13 years?
I think it was of a totally different order, and let me explain why. We were bringing in the private sector because we were desperate to get waiting lists down, and we thought they could add capacity. This is more, under this government, substituting for what the public sector is doing. We brought waiting lists down from 18 months to 18 weeks because we brought the private sector in on top. This is about something totally different.
OK, you three at the front then. If you want, you can do your comments one after the other, and then we'll ask Ed to answer. So start with you, Becky.
Hello. I have so many people writing right now about mental health. Do you plan to increase the budget for mental health? Because right now people don't feel that there is enough support and understanding and education.
Hold on to that. Sorry. Yeah, so increasing the budget on mental health. Lewis?
So one of the things with improving the NHS is obviously when trying to divert more money towards it. At the moment, most of the money seems to go to sort of consultants to diagnose the problems, but the money doesn't actually go on fixing it. So what would you do about this, and how would you actually reverse the privatisation?
Okay.
And then from a women's health perspective, do we need exclusion zones outside clinics where abortions are performed?
Okay. So on the first point, we do want to see more of a priority for mental health. Definitely, we said we'll enshrine it in the Constitution, in the NHS Constitution, to make sure people have a proper right, not just to drugs, but to so-called talking therapies. So mental health gets the priority that it deserves, and that's really important.
And it will have ring-fence money, though, because you said an increase.
Yeah, we want to protect the NHS, the mental health budget, definitely. On the question about consultants, you're not talking about sort of kind of doctors.
No,
you're talking
doctors, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about...
Yeah.
Look, I think there is a real issue. I mentioned this competition lawyers thing earlier. There's been a big increase in bureaucracy as a result of what this government has done, this big top-down reorganisation. We're not proposing one of those. I think it's really important that we don't have it. Just on your question, just explain the question.
Yeah, so there was a video last week about a woman who walked past this abortion clinic where some anti-abortion protesters were campaigning with huge signs, and people are calling for exclusion zones around those areas because obviously we want to protect the right to protest, but not so much that it affects women who are making a very difficult choice, and so much that these clinics don't want to, the people don't want to go to work, and they're deciding, well, should we be performing abortions in there because people aren't feeling safe going there?
Well, look, the first thing I'd say is that, it's such a difficult decision for any woman to make, to have an abortion, that they need proper protection. And that is really important. I mean, that's got to be a non-negotiable. I'd have to think more about what it means for the right to protest, because at the same time, the right to protest is important. But I don't think women should feel intimidated going into an abortion clinic. It's hard enough, making that decision. And I don't think I really worry about it. So I have to look further at it. But I think it's really important that women feel safe and protected when they're making that really difficult decision.
OK, thanks, Ed. Let's find out what people make of your policy so far. The results are in. 71% yes, Ed. We're on a roll at the minute. 29% no, Ed. So, OK. How are you feeling about that?
Good.
Satisfied? Good. OK, right. Let's go on to your third topic, democracy. And here's Kenny with some context.
More than 33% of our MPs are privately educated. Less than 1 in 4 MPs are women. Only 4% of MPs are from black and ethnic minority groups. Does our parliament truly reflect our society? In the general election in 2010, less than 1 in 4 young people turned out to vote. And as a result, politicians thought that we were easier to let down. This is why we lost our EMA, our tuition fees were tripled, and youth services were cut drastically.
OK, powerful summary from Kenny there. So, Ed, tell us, if you're the next Prime Minister, how are you going to fix our democracy?
Well, it certainly needs fixing. One very specific thing that we're announcing today is that we're going to have votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. And today I am pledging to bring that in by May 2016. So in time for the London mayoral election and other elections that take place in May 2016. So if you're a 15-year-old today, that's within less than 18 months, you'll be able to vote if there is a Labour government. Now, that is part of our commitment to hearing the voice of young people. I think we need to hear the voice of young people more in our democracy. It's a sign of trust in young people. As Kenny said on that film, you know, there are 1.5 million 16 and 17-year-olds, many of whom lost the EMA. If George Osborne had known that those young people could actually vote, I think he'd have at least talked to them and consulted them a bit more about decisions like that. So we want the vote for 16 and 17-year-olds. We're going to make it happen.
OK, so obviously you visited a school with me in Doncaster. Yeah. Bringing the vote down could be great, so many people enfranchised, but how do we guarantee that they're engaged? Are we going to have the voter registration in schools, the democratic education? Because, you know, you speak to so many people, I don't want to pick on him, but Jamal, you know, didn't register the vote until I sort of collared him into it at 22 years old. So he went through his whole school career and no one told us, and that is common nature. So how do we ensure that people...
Well, you did pick on him, actually, didn't you?
I did pick on him.
Well, look, I think it's an important point. So on the I know Bite the Ballot have been making a big campaign about making sure that schools and colleges, if we go down the 16 and 17-year-old route, which we're going to do, making sure that schools and colleges kind of get involved, you know, with the consent of 16 and 17-year-olds, get their names to electoral registration officers. We support that campaign. We'll work with you to make it happen. I think that's important. But there's a much wider thing, isn't there, which is about educating young people, giving young people the citizenship education in schools, giving young people the tools to make the decisions. Look, I think we know our democracy, and Kenny said it on the film, we know our democracy is really suffering, and we can't let it go on like that. So I think we can make it happen. It's going to take work. And Bite the Ballot's work is important.
OK, guys, well, tell us what you're making of Ed's answers. Let's keep them tweets coming in. Hashtag yes if you agree and hashtag no if you disagree. Jimmy, you're going to kick us off?
Yeah. Hey. So I'm told that your strategy is to only go after 35% of the people for votes, which I think has probably got to be one of the reasons why young people feel quite disengaged, because it tends to be more of a focus on older people. So what are you doing to kind of reform that? Is that true, for a start?
No, certainly not.
Okay, fine.
Definitely not. No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not true. Look, we want to get as many people voting for us as possible, including young people.
Yeah.
And how do we get young people engaged in politics? And this is the debate we've got to have. I actually think if young people thought that politics would make a difference to them, then they'll vote. And you know, part of that is about education, but part of it is about people like me showing I'm going to make a difference. That's why I started tonight with jobs, because young people want to know, am I going to get a job? Am I going to get a skill? Am I going to be able to buy a house, or am I going to be able to rent a house in a way that is affordable for me? And then the other thing that I think young people are asking is, are there big ideals for how we want to change the country? Because I think lots of young people want to know, is there a big vision for the country? Now, I feel I do have a big vision for the country, which is about saying this question which countries all around the world are facing, are we going to become more and more unequal, just working for the richest, or are we going to do something about it and change that? So look, they're my ideas about how we engage young people, talking about young people themselves and also talking about our society and how we change it.
Becky?
Hello. Going back to voting, I have a person here that says, how can 16-year-olds vote when many aren't educated on politics? Now, adding to that, I do feel that lots of young people, 16, 17-year-olds, want to vote, but there isn't enough education, serious education in secondary schools about it. So what would you do to impact that before the voting comes in next year?
Well, we've got to have a big mission to improve citizenship education.
Yeah.
Some of it is good, some of it may not be so good, and that's what we've got to do. But in a way, look, I could have taken the route of sort of having the excuse, if you like, of saying, oh, well, we can't do this until, you know, citizenship education is improved, let's have a long committee, let's discuss it for 5 years, the usual politician's answer. That's the wrong answer. The crisis of our democracy is too big. The voice of young people needs to be heard. Let's force ourselves to also improve the education that young people get. And, you know, there is a lesson in Scotland. 16 and 17-year-olds voted in the referendum in Scotland. By the way, the Labour Party didn't seek that. I think it was the right thing to do, though. And, you know, people said at the beginning, how can young people possibly, you know, have a view? How can they possibly, you know, are they educated enough? Young people learnt about what the issues were because they had the chance to vote and they exercised that vote in the referendum.
In the Scottish referendum, I think about 80% of 16 and 17-year-olds voted for independence, showing that they might be a little bit more kind of easily impressionable than older votes.
I didn't think it was that high, but look,
it was higher than every other.
That wasn't my position, obviously, for yes. But I don't think you can sort of change your view because you didn't get, you know, you didn't like how people voted. That wasn't my experience of the young people I talked to in Scotland. I think lots of young people were thinking quite hard about what it meant for them, what it meant for the country. But, you know, I don't like this argument that if you're 16 or 17 and you can, you know, join the army, you can, you know, go out and work and pay taxes, you can do a whole range of things. Why shouldn't you be able to have a voice in our democracy? You're having decisions that are really, you know, affecting you. So that's why I've been a long-standing supporter of this, and that's why I want to do it if I become Prime Minister.
And that stat was a bit too high there. Yeah, it's not as many as that. If we can get the real stat, I will publish that to you. I've asked the guys to look into that. Go on then, Miles.
Hi, Ed.
Miles,
something I've been quite frustrated about the past couple of years with politicians across the spectrum is their inability to bring up the mass surveillance state with GCHQ. Ed Snowden, for me, is a hero. He addressed one of the biggest threats to democracy. And I cannot believe no one is bringing up. D-notices have been given to the media organisations not to report on it. The Guardian had their hard drive smashed with the data. And I'm just wondering, where is the rebuttal? And the question I would really ask you is, are you happy the fact that the GCHQ can access your personal emails? They can access the personal emails and potentially read at any time of journalists and even of lawyers, which has been proved recently.
Well, the one thing I'd say to you, well, two things I'd say, Miles, briefly. First of all, I think it is incredibly important that there are rights for citizens so that they know their personal privacy is not being invaded without proper oversight of the way it happens. We've got to improve the judicial oversight of what happens and what our agencies do. There is ministerial oversight, but there's got to be better judicial oversight, and we've campaigned for that. On the other hand, I think the other thing I'd say to you, though, is that we also have a responsibility, and I would have a responsibility if I was Prime Minister, to make sure our country is kept safe. And keeping our country safe is about making sure that if people are in... You know, you saw with the death of Lee Rigby recently, the murder of Lee Rigby, you saw the discussions that were going on social media by his killers before he was murdered. Now, I think that most right-thinking people will think, well, with proper oversight, there should be proper access to that kind of threatening information. It's got to be about national security. It's got to be about serious things. It can't just be, if you like, just sort of kind of, you know, simply a sort of casual. But I do think that the security service and others, they've got a responsibility to keep us safe, and we've got a responsibility to make sure that it's done in the right way with proper oversight. And we've strongly argued for strengthening that oversight. It's not good enough at the moment, and I want it strengthened.
I just haven't seen that. And also I just want to say that you talk about the intelligence services and we trust them. One of the chief members of the intelligence service said that because of Lee Rigby, Facebook is a safe haven for terrorists. I mean, that language is very Orwellian and scary, and I think that to just bow down to that rhetoric or to just giving to the fears of terrorism. I mean, we could go with a cliche here.
But hang on a minute.
Well, just to finish my point.
Yeah.
The cliche we could go with is terrorists want to take away our freedom. Well, they're winning. They're winning. If we're giving up all our civil liberties in the name of terrorism, that's exactly what they want.
Can you give a quick response?
Yeah,
to that?
quick response. Look, I'm not going to get into the names of social media companies, but look, on this question, we know from the report that was done that one of his killers was posting that he was going to murder a British soldier, right? Now, I've just got to say to you that with the right oversight, I think it is perfectly legitimate to say there should be ways in which that is accessed. Because it's think of Lee Rigby's family. I mean, I understand your concerns about civil liberties, and I understand the concerns about making sure freedoms are protected, and I share them. But it shouldn't be done in a way that means somebody who's about to kill a British soldier is not found out, if it possibly can be done.
Just a final point. Do you think that actually the point is to look at the root causes of why these events happen instead of using mass surveillance as patchwork? I just find it incredibly dangerous. Like, I'm glad you've been honest with me here, but it shows you that the political class are just completely off their head. You're just saying, let's put more and more cameras in people's homes.
I'm not saying that.
No, but it's
I'm
the
not trying to
slippery
put a camera in your home or anyone else's.
But there are, because they can access all our computers and cameras, our phones. My phone I've got encrypted, and there's been over 20,000 tracking attempts in the last 3 weeks of my data.
I think that is a concern. That is a concern.
I totally understand the concern.
One that is not discussed enough.
And Ed,
I don't think Miles and I are going to
complete Labour leadership on civil liberties grounds, and that's how you distinguished yourself from old Labour. But now you're supporting the deeply illiberal European arrest warrant. Now you're, Labour, yeah. Now you're supporting the European arrest warrant. You're doing the Snoopers Charter or the Data Retention Act that you rushed through Parliament really quickly. Where is old Ed Miliband, and how have you changed? Why have you changed from the?
Let me answer you directly. It's a really important question. The European Convention on Human Rights, absolute foundation of our liberties. This government wants to get rid of it. We will defend it. On the question that you talked about around the questions of intelligence gathering that was debated in the summer, it was Labour that said there's got to be a comprehensive review, and maybe Miles, you should contribute to this, a comprehensive review of the way in which the oversight of surveillance and those things. It's got to be stronger. It's got to be different. I agree with that.
Why did you vote for it then?
Much better. Well, because I was convinced that there was good grounds for thinking that to keep the country safe, we needed to make those changes. But we've got to have better oversight of it, and I'm absolutely committed to having that better oversight. And look, one other example. When the government came forward with legislation on secret courts, extending secret courts, it was Labour that said, you can't do it in this extensive way. You've got to have proper oversight. Where I stand is let's keep the country safe, but let's make sure there is proper accountability, proper oversight of any intelligence gathering that's done.
Guys, 2 quick comments, and I know you've been waiting. Kenny and then Max. Ed, if you can answer those, we'll see how you fared on the hashtags.
Yeah, Ed, I wanted to ask, obviously the Labour Party boasts about the representation of women in terms of their party. But what about representation in terms of ethnic minorities actually becoming MPs? Because a fifth of all Labour MPs, the constituents, have ethnic minorities in there. So don't you feel like the Labour Party are sort of doing a bad job in regards to representing ethnic minorities? And on top of that, young people. You talked about engagement. It's not just about making me know that my vote can make a difference. It's also showing that people like me can also become like you. So I should be able to be in your seat.
You should.
Regardless.
We've got to do a better job.
But what are you going to do?
Well, we've got to do a better job.
And would you do shortlist?
Look, we've got Chuka Umunna, Sadiq Khan in our shadow cabinet. We've got 16 members of parliament from a BME background, but we've got to do better. We've got to do better. And let me tell you what we're doing. So we've got a future candidates programme on which a substantial number of people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds, and we've got to do everything. I'm absolutely committed, Kenny, to doing everything I can to reach out to people, to get them into seats, to get them to be Labour candidates, not just by the way as MPs, but as councillors and others. And I'll be honest with you, I'll be clear with you. We've got to do a better job than we're doing. We don't yet look like the country we seek to represent. And if you've got ideas about what we should be doing, I'm happy to look at them.
One of the ideas is shortlist, because you've got women shortlist, so why not for ethnic minorities and why not for young people? Tell me how much people in the Labour Party under 30 out of all the MPs.
Well, look, we should look at all of these. Some of these. Sorry.
What's the number?
We've got a few MPs who are under 30. We've got a few MPs who are under 30. But look, I want more young people, definitely, and I want more people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds, and we'll look at all the ideas.
He's saying he's going to follow up, Ken. Just put your suggestions in, see if you get a feedback, and obviously you can publish it. Max?
like you've brought up, this whole thing is about engaging young people and basically getting young people to register to vote. Now, I'm not young. I'm probably too old to be sitting here, but
just
no, it's okay.
You're young in my eyes, actually. You're definitely young in my eyes.
Thank you, but I've got flirting with me. It's nice. I've got a lot of young followers, and this is great. The whole point is a platform for our followers to talk to you. And I put it out this afternoon a couple of times saying, look, I'm meeting Ed, I'm talking to Ed Miliband. I've got questions, and just okay, a lot of people are silly on Twitter, but
don't read them out.
I won't read the silly ones. But look, this is Ben. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Whoever comes in will be corrupt. Tim says, I don't vote because all MPs are as bad as each other. I don't agree with the whole system. Ollie, the vote's irrelevant. Corporate entities still restrict any government from representing people. And then other people ask, what's your favourite cheese? Where do you think Stephen Gerrard should play, etc. But the point is, how do you the sensible point within all of that is how do you differentiate yourself from all the other MPs? When most young people, okay, look, we're all politicised and that's fine, but a lot of people don't care and they look at you and they don't see the difference between you, Cameron, and Farage.
Look, it's a really important question. I mean, I suppose it goes to the vision of the country. I think this is the generational question that we face as a country is this question of inequality. Are we going to become a more and more unequal country that just works for a few people? That is the big question of our time, in my view. And that's what I think people are feeling. When people talk about, corporations and what corporations are doing, like the energy companies and others, I think that's really what they're getting at. They don't feel they have any power. Inequality is not just about money, by the way. It's about power. Do you have power over the energy companies or the rail companies or the payday lenders or Rupert Murdoch even? And look, what I stand for is a more equal distribution of power, of resources, of wealth, of income. That's why I came into politics. And I think I think you're right. Lots of people do say there's no difference. And we've got to take them on. And part of my challenge in the next 5 months is to go out around the country, events like this, other events, and say there's big issues. There's the future of young people, jobs, education, housing, climate change, which we haven't mentioned yet, which I care passionately about. That's all on the ballot paper, I believe, at the election.
OK, Ed, let's see. People have been making their choices known. Let's go, see how you feel. 50-50 on this particular one. OK, wow, all right.
Could be worse. Could be
worse.
All right,
we are going to go into the fourth and final topic. This was chosen by you, our online audience. Here's immigration, presented by our friend Harry Hitchens.
1 in 3 people believe that the tensions between immigrants and UK-born citizens is the main reason for division in the country. There's 100,000 more people coming in than there are going out. There are people being enslaved because of the management of the immigration policy in this country. As a 19-year-old kid, I've got my first vote coming up in the general election. I think it's a failure that I don't know more about this.
OK, Ed, so Nigel last week sat here, said about immigration. And basically, I think lots of things that resonated with people at home. He said, we need to control not the amount of people coming in, but are they coming in ready to work with qualifications, without severe criminal records and without major diseases. When he says it like that, you can't really argue with it. If you're Prime Minister, how are you going to change or solve this immigration crisis?
Well, I don't agree with Nigel, because my starting point is immigration is of benefit to the country. And, I'm the son of immigrant parents, and I believe they've made a contribution to this country. I believe lots and lots of people who come into this country make a huge contribution. And I think we've got to recognise that as our starting point. Now, however, I also have changed Labour's approach on immigration, because I think people's anxieties are not based on prejudice. They're based on real anxiety. And I think we've got to address the real anxieties. And that is the way that we make the vision of a diverse Britain, which we are and which I celebrate, work. And what's that about? That's about the undercutting of wages. So when people come into the country, aren't paid the minimum wage, people say, well, hang on a minute, somebody's being paid less than the minimum wage, that means my wages are being driven down. Or people say, well, I think people should learn English when they come here, particularly if they're in public-facing jobs. Or people say, I think you should contribute before you can claim benefits. Now, that's our approach on this. The last thing I'd say on this, in this area of all others, we've talked about cynicism about politics. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep, or promises that you think aren't right. I don't want us to leave the European Union like Nigel, because I think it would be bad for the country. And I'm not going to make promises like David Cameron that says we can reduce immigration to the tens of thousands, which he did at the last election, when he had not a clue how he'd do it. So I think in this area, set out what you can do and let's make the vision of a Britain that is diverse work for everybody.
OK, so let us know if you agree with Ed's policies and what you're about to hear. Tweet at Bite the Ballot using the hashtag YesEd if you agree and hashtag NoEd if you don't, and we'll bring the results shortly. Yes.
Are people's anxieties not also partly based on a fear of non-UK nationals promoted by the anti-terrorism legislation of 2001 that allowed people to be held without trial for 3 years in immigration detention, such as Belmarsh Prison?
I don't think that's what people's anxieties about immigration are based on. I honestly don't. And I think it's really important, this. Look, previously people thought the Labour Party was saying that when they were saying, I'm worried about immigration, that it's like prejudice. I think the vast, vast majority of people who are worried about immigration are not prejudiced. They're saying, my community's changed really fast. I'm worried about what's happening to wages. It's a real issue, this. It's a real issue that people say, if an employer can get somebody at less than the minimum wage, what's it going to do to my wage if I'm in that same occupation? Or if they're just advertising, we had this thing recently, a major company was just advertising abroad and not offering the opportunities to young people. So this is why I say you've got to put in place the right measures to make the vision work. I honestly don't think it's based on those things.
I think we at least have to accept that there is a racial tinge to some of these things that people are saying. And I think that that's a racial tinge that's promoted by, I don't know, the last 10 years, a lot of language of non-UK nationals and kind of the foreign, the other, and also that kind of thing that allowed people to be extradited to other countries and then regarded by those countries' courts as foreign nationals. There's a lot of kind of play on here's where I sorry to interrupt. Here's where I agree with you. Look, when Nigel Farage said that thing about I don't want to live next door to a Romanian, I think that was wrong. He shouldn't have said that. Or when people in UKIP have made terrible remarks about Lenny Henry, saying Lenny Henry should go back to Africa, that's disgusting and outrageous. So I think we've got to call out racist sentiment when it's there. And I think it's absolutely right that we do that. But I think I don't think it's right to associate everybody who's got a concern with immigration, or even the vast majority, with those tendencies. I don't think they are the same tendencies.
Becky.
Hello, I have a question, or two questions. You've said in the past that Labour messed up its immigration policies when you were last in power. How can we be sure that they're corrected now? And the second thing is, also, what do your plans mean for us, for example? Will our fingerprints be checked if we leave the country? OK, let me deal with both of those. Cool, yeah, there's two there.
On the Labour issue, on the issue of the Labour government's record, I've taken this view since I became leader of the opposition. You should say when you've got something wrong. Now, we underestimated quite significantly the impact of Polish immigration. If we'd known then what we know now, we'd have done it over a much longer transitional period. That's why we've changed our policy. That's why we've said we want longer transitional controls when new countries enter the European Union. So how do people know that we've learnt our lessons? Because we have. Secondly, I do think we should count people in and out. Now, there's different ways of doing it, but I do think we should count people in and out. One of the things people want is a sense of control, that when people enter and when people exit the country, we know how many people are coming in. What's the reason for that? It's not about the sort of surveillance state or anything which Miles was asking about earlier on. It's about knowing what's the pressure going to be on resources, how many people are actually coming in. Let's stop illegal immigration happening. So, look, I think you can do this in a way that actually has proper entry and exit checks so you know who's coming into your country.
Thank you.
Is it just one massive bouncer with one of those? Sorry, this is from English Dan, who I don't believe is a fan, from the hundreds of tweets I've got from him. Is it racist to discriminate against our non-EU cousins in favour of our EU brothers? Please ask. So
I think what Dan is referring to is that it's a sort of been a situation where if you're from outside the EU, you can't, for example, get access to benefits straight away, but when you're in the EU, you can. Now, personally, that's why one of the reasons why we're changing that to say you should contribute before you claim. So you've got a 2-year waiting period, if you like, before you get benefits. That's what we're going to argue for. That's what we want to change. I think that's fair, and I think that's the right thing to do.
How do you change that image that some people have? I was sitting next to someone at work who said, I'm fed up with the influx of immigrants coming here and living off benefits, which we know statistically is nonsense. But a lot of people believe that.
I think here's the reality about this. I think some of it is about the cost, but a lot more of it is about the sense of fairness. people want a sense, it's actually true more generally about our benefit system. People want a sense that it's about contribution. That was the original concept, actually, when William Beveridge designed the welfare state, was this idea of contribution, that you should contribute before you claim, or you should, that it's, if you like, you put in and you get out. And I think it's important to do that in relation to EU people coming in.
Guys, just bring in an online question. We've got one ready. Should come up on our screen now. OK, Green Ads 87. Ed, why do you pander to UKIP on immigration? Do you pander?
No. It's a simple answer. When I stood for the Labour leadership, in the first speech I gave, I talked about immigration. I talked about it being a significant issue for us. And, I passionately believe in the vision of Britain, of a diverse country. If you think about the London Olympics, we sold that vision of diversity to the world, and the world loved that vision. But we've got to work at that vision. You've got to make that vision work. If you just say, well, anybody who's concerned about immigration is somehow a racist or prejudiced, you're not going to make that vision work. You're going to have lots of people like Nigel saying, let's get out of the European Union, let's close our borders. I don't think we should do either of those things.
Are they playing on fear, then? Are they playing on people's fears?
I think they're playing on people's anxieties. Yeah, I think they've got the wrong solutions. Look, just think about this European Union question. It'd be a disaster for us to get out of the European Union. But the way you convince people of that is not by saying, well, anybody who's concerned about immigration is somehow prejudiced.
OK. Yes, Jermaine. Oh,
hey.
It's warm.
I would like to ask, what... Oh, God, I forgot my question.
Jermaine.
Oh, no, I forgot my question. No. What are you going to do to promote the benefits of immigration rather than have Nigel Farage going around the country promoting the drawbacks of immigration and having immigration in the areas that are popular where there's least immigration?
I think you've got to talk about it in the way that I've talked about it, Jermaine. I think you've got to talk about it as benefiting the country, but also talk about the ways in which we can make it work. We can have the kind of control that will make people think it's going to work for the country, and you understand my concerns. I think people aren't unreasonable. They just want to know, do you get my concerns? Do you get that it's changing this community and it's having effects on my life?
OK, quick comment from Lucy, and then we'll try and move on so you can have some general comments as well.
Wonderful. I have a quick question. So we talk a lot about immigration, but we never talk about asylum seekers. What is your policy on asylum seekers?
Well, look, as a child of refugees, I think it's incredibly important. My parents both fled from the Nazis. My dad in 1940, my mum after the war, came here after the war. I think it's incredibly important that we are a place that, has a home for people who are refugees fleeing from persecution. I think it's really important. And it's really important that we collaborate internationally on that. Sometimes this government has shown incredible mean-mindedness in relation to refugees, and that's because they're breaking their more general promises on immigration, so they think somehow we've got to be mean-minded about refugees. I think, the tolerance and the fact that Britain is a safe haven for people who, are legitimately fleeing persecution is quite important. We've got to do our bit internationally.
One more? Jimmy, did you have?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask. I think that a lot of people's reservedness around immigration is down to a lack of awareness of the benefits. How would you actually spread that message about what immigration contributes to the country and to our society?
I think it's what I said to Jermaine, Jimmy. I think it's about saying, it's about when I talk about this issue, I always try and do it in what I hope is a balanced way, which is to talk about the benefits and be honest about my background and say that, look, that is a benefit to the country. And the more you can explain the history and the benefits that we've had as a country, the better, I think.
OK, thanks, guys. So, look, let's go to the vote resolve on the public's views on Ed's immigration policies. They're coming in. 51% yes, Ed.
Better than last time.
Yeah, we nudged up just on the last one. OK, so Leaders Live is about you, our online audience. Let's take a look at some of the questions and comments you've been sending in. Luke Lefty, it's very disappointing to see Ed supporting mass snooping. OK. Derek 60DF, would a Labour government renationalise our railways and make it a service fit for purpose? And Harriet Bradley, OK, we've had over 1,000 rapists are convicted off of 95,000 reported cases. What's your plan to tackle that? Can you squeeze in those last two there then? So nationalising the railways and then the cases of the rape there?
So the answer to the first question is yes, we do want more of a public sector role in our railways. People may know that East Coast has been run in public hands. I think it's been done well. The government, out of dogma, is privatising it. We think it's wrong, and we're campaigning against it. I think it's got to be value for money, but I think the public sector can play more of a role. And on the second question, as I said, that is a really important question. You know, we've got to make sure that more rapists are brought to justice. That is about everything from the police to promoting women's ability to come forward and making it possible for them to be, if you like, taken seriously when they come forward. I think it's a huge issue. We had a whole task force looking at this, has a whole series of recommendations for people who are interested, and you can find it on our website.
But then, how do those recommendations become law so that stats like that don't get any worse?
I think it's partly about raising the importance of it as a government and making sure it is a top priority. And it is something that we made a priority of in government, and it's something we'd make a priority of again if we were in government.
And I think so. Some of a variety of the issues you've heard today really can be traced back to the people's role in it. You know, placing emphasis on mental health in schools, even things like sex and relationship education can cover cases like rape, so that it becomes normal for people to talk about it in a safe environment. I think obviously education's the one we're going to be hammering on everyone's door for the next election. Guys, any other comments off topic? I know Jazz is going to babble. Yes, please.
Hi, I've got quite a few followers from all over the UK, and to touch upon what has been mentioned earlier with the Scottish independence vote, and I think a lot of that came from kind of feelings that everything is very London-centric when it comes to politics. And as you said, with the girl looking for the internship, she would have to move to London. Like, everything is kind of based here as a hub. Have you got any kind of policies or ideas in place in order to try and balance it out a bit around the country? Because I do think people feel disenfranchised because it's Westminster and they only see the bubble of London and the banks, and they don't see anything else.
I agree. And we've got to give a lot more power to English towns and cities. We've done it in Scotland, we've done it in Wales, but we've got to do it in England. And we've got, I'll just give you a very practical example, which is about local bus services. I'm an MP in Doncaster. What's one of the biggest frustrations of my constituents? Unlike London, it's not a regulated service. So whether it's fares or routes, people feel they have no say, and the people they elect locally have no say either. So not just on transport, but on skills and economic development. Let's give much more power to our towns and cities, and we're going to do that.
OK, we've got a couple of minutes. A few more comments then. I'm going to ask a few of you to say it, and then we'll see if we can get answers to all of them. Go on then.
So as a gay man, I can get married, I have equal rights in the workplace, but I still can't give blood. Why?
OK, keep that one. Lou, you had one?
Yeah. So what would your policies be for tuition fees at university? Would you raise them, lower them, or completely abolish them?
That's a popular one, getting a few nods. Kenny, you got a quick one?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what's Labour's policy in regards to reducing the reoffending rate, which is costing us almost 13 billion every year?
OK, so we've got a variety there. Really.
OK, so let me go. I think that is a real issue, and it's something we've got to look at. We've got to look at the ways in which we can make it happen. Because
all blood gets screened anyway.
Okay.
So why am I banned from doing something that?
Well, I'll take it away and come back to you with a good answer.
Thank you.
It's a good question. Tuition fees. I want to lower the tuition fee. I'm quite sort of. I'll learn from the Nick Clegg experience. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I'm very keen to make a promise that I can keep. We will set out a policy in our manifesto.
Will it have an amount?
Yes, it will. We've got to make sure that it's a costed and credible promise. So we're taking particular care about this issue because, as I say, I think many people feel let down by what Nick Clegg did, and we're not going to make that mistake. And then on reducing. What's the single? Let me ask you this question, Kenny. What's the single thing that you think would make a biggest difference to reoffending?
A big difference. So actually funding to actually prevent people going to prison in the first place, particularly groups which are overrepresented, for example, black and minority ethnics, people in care. What would the Labour Party actually do to tackle that?
I actually think you're right about this.
More people of my colour in prison, in terms of representation, than in the actual country. So what would you do to tackle that?
I think that the causes of crime, tackling the causes of crime, you've got to be tough on when people commit a criminal offence, but you've also got to tackle the causes. And we would do that. Look, I think it's about everything from youth services, local youth services. I know in my own constituency, they are incredibly important. I think it's work that the community can do. I think something else, which is giving people a sense of hope and aspiration, giving people a sense that this is what goes back to the big picture, if you like. Are we going to give people a sense, some of the people that you're talking about, that there's a legal way, there's a path which it doesn't involve crime, of them getting on in our society? And if you do that, I think that is the best way of cutting crime and indeed cutting reoffending.
So basically you're going to have to tackle all these issues we spoke about today in order for people to not live in that environment.
Definitely.
And what's your pledge in regards to cutting the rates? Because everyone says we're going to cut the number of people going to prison, but it keeps on increasing and increasing.
Look, we do want to drive those. We do want to drive those numbers down. I think people are sufficiently cynical about politics. I don't want to make you a promise that I'm not going to keep, but we do want to get those numbers down.
OK, guys, we are out of time. We could carry on going. If you've got more comments for Ed, please tweet him Ed_Miliband, where the conversation can continue. So, a massive thank you from Ed, our studio audience, the teams at Bite the Ballot, ITV News, Twitter UK, Byte News, Full Fact, and of course you, our online audience. That was a big list, I tell you. Join us next week where Nick Clegg, leader of the Liberal Democrats, will be tackling health, education and jobs. You can decide the fourth topic for Nick. Go to leaderslive.co.uk where you can vote now. From me, Ed, and everyone here, good night. See you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed. It was great.